Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christos Xenofondos. I'm the Assistant Director for Administrative Services at the Rhode Island Department of Transportation and Chair of AASHTO's Committee on Performance-Based Management. A warm welcome to all of our panelists and attendees to today's webinar. The Committee on Performance-Based Management is pleased to be producing this webinar series in cooperation with Federal Highway and the AASHTO Transportation Performance Management, TPM, Technical Services Program, TSP. It's a great way to bring people together around a series of important topics and to connect with the performance management community. And if your state is not a member of the TPM TSP, we strongly encourage you to reach out to one of us and sign up for the TSP. Today marks the 28th webinar in our bi-monthly series. It features presentations that explore the implications of automated vehicles and shared mobility on performance management, including how to develop appropriate metrics that account for the fluctuating nature of shared mobility and the predictive capabilities of automated systems. For more information on this webinar series, please visit tpm-portal.com. Navigate to events in the main menu and then select TPM webinar series. The TPM portal is also home to the series archive of recordings, downloadable slides, and valuable resources. And of course, today's webinar will be posted to the site this afternoon. If you have any suggestions on future webinar topics or have questions for the presenters during today's webinar, please submit your comments or questions using the webinar chat feature. We will answer questions during the panelist discussion at the end of the webinar. Very importantly, if you haven't already done so, please be sure to mute your audio so that our presenters are not interrupted. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the learning objectives for today's webinar are to explore how automated vehicles and shared mobility are transforming transportation systems, identify how performance management must adapt to these changes by developing new metrics, highlight the benefits of integrating real-time data from these technologies in safety and mobility applications, and as always, share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge. Next slide, please. So for our agenda for today, I will introduce our speakers before each presentation, but in brief, they are Mireya Kuskie, American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, Alan Davis from Georgia Department of Transportation, and Randy Iwasaki, a senior fellow at UC Berkley Institute of Transportation Studies. Following Randy, Yana Park of Spyborn Partners will help moderate the questions. Just another reminder to please submit your comments or questions using the Zoom's chat feature anytime during the webinar. We'll make sure to cover them during the panelist discussion. And in response to a frequently asked question, as we said before, yes, the slides and video will be available after today's webinar at tpm-portal.com. I will now turn it over to Anna McLaughlin to provide a brief update from AASHTO. Anna?
Thank you, Christos. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna McLaughlin. I'm the Program Director for Transportation Program Management here at AASHTO, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on behalf of AASHTO and our Committee on Performance-Based Management. First, I want to acknowledge and thank our partners at the Federal Highway Administration for their continued support and sponsorship of this webinar series. While they couldn't join us today, their partnership has been instrumental in making these webinars possible. As Christos mentioned, this webinar is also brought to you through AASHTO's Performance Management Technical Services Program, which works to advance TPM practices nationwide through education, technical assistance, and events like today's webinar. Please reach out to me or Christos if you would like more information about the TSP and its benefits. Today's topic is particularly timely as state DOTs work to integrate new mobility options into their planning and operations. We need to evolve our performance management frameworks to capture the full picture of how these technologies impact our transportation systems. The Committee on Performance-Based Management plays a key role in helping agencies navigate these evolving challenges. And I want to emphasize that CPBM is always looking for engaged members to contribute their expertise and perspectives. If today's discussion sparks your interest in getting more involved with performance management at the national level, I encourage you to reach out to me directly. You can find my contact information on the AASHTO website, or feel free to email me at amclaughlin@ashto.org. We have opportunities to participate in subcommittees, to contribute to research projects, to share case studies, and to help shape national guidance. Your real-world experience with implementing TPM, especially as it relates to emerging technologies, is exactly what is needed to help develop practical, implementable solutions. For those seeking TPM resources, I strongly encourage you to explore the AASHTO TPM portal at tpm-portal.com. This is truly your one-stop shop for all things related to transportation performance management. And as we dive into today's presentations, I hope you'll all consider how your agency is preparing for these technological shifts. The transition to connected and automated vehicles won't happen overnight, but the decisions we make today about our performance management systems will determine how well we can monitor and manage these changes. So thank you again for joining us. Your participation in these webinars helps build us a stronger, more connected performance management community. I'm excited to hear from our presenters about how we can better prepare for the performance management challenges and opportunities that automated vehicles and shared mobility will bring. And now I'm going to turn it back over to you, Christos, to introduce our first presenter.
Thank you so much, Anna. And our first presenter is Mireya Kuskie. And Mireya is the Associate Program Manager for Safety at AASHTO, where she supports the CAV, AV working groups and projects with the Committee on Transportation System Operations. Before joining AASHTO, she served as a Senior Project Assistant with the Transportation Research Board at the National Academy of Sciences. Mireya?
Yes, hello everyone. Let me make sure I share the correct screen. All right, so are you guys seeing my PowerPoint?
Yes, that looks great.
Beautiful, that's fantastic. All right, so I'll start this off with a little bit of a disclaimer. I do come from an operations and safety side here at AASHTO. I primarily work on the safety and mobility team, which is operations and safety. So my perspective and my members' perspectives might not quite align, but this is where we're at, and we're always open to having a larger conversation about it, and we can dive into that later. But to go ahead and get started. So connected and automated vehicles, here at AASHTO, we have two groups. We have our connected and automated vehicle community of practice, and then we also have our system mobility and automated technology working group. So for our connected and automated vehicle community of practice, or our CAV-COP, as we call it, this is a monthly meeting. It is open to all. We like to call them our state friends and our outside friends. We have a state roundtable peer exchange once a month. That portion of the meeting is closed off. So if you are not a AASHTO member or we are having a sensitive conversation, we do tend to close it. We currently have 72 members. Our average attendance is around 40-ish people per month. And our chair is Daniela Bremer with Washington DOT. And we have two vice chairs. That's Tara Old with Minnesota DOT and Darren Anderson with Texas DOT. We do a lot of different things with this group. So we do peer exchange. We also do, back in 2021 with Matt Hardy. I believe this group is familiar with him. He helped create the Connected and Automated Vehicles Policy Principles. Those are currently locatable. You're able to locate them on our Emerging Mobility Area webpage here on our transportation.org at AASHTO. We are in the process of revamping it, but I'll get into that in a little bit. That is a guiding document that they have used since the creation of it. But that did go through a different group to get approval, which we will dive into that now. So System Mobility and Automated Technology Working Group is a combined group of a couple different autonomous vehicle, connected vehicle groups, just to kind of get everyone in one space and to have more collaborative conversations. But this is where any changes to our policy principals would go through. So they would go through our working group here. This is a closed group. This is for CTSO members only, the Committee on Transportation System Operations. This is a bi-monthly meeting. The primary purpose is to have state roundtables, discuss what's going on regionally, and then also review materials that could potentially be created by or thought of by the Connected and Automated Vehicle COP. We also do a lot of surveys with this group. We try to gauge what interests they have and what needs they have in terms of education for V2X. So we do spend a lot of time with them. We do a lot of really great stuff, but they do help us a lot with finalizing documents that are created. And then we have two co-chairs for this one. So Daniela Bremer with Washington DOT, and then we have John Hibbard with Georgia DOT. Both are excellent. And then next we have our guiding principles. So our guiding principles is a transformation of our policy principles that were created back in 2021. At the beginning of last year, we decided to revamp them to try and shorten them, make them a little bit easier to later on implement. So we have revised it from policy principles to guiding principles. These guiding principles are for CAV operators and state partners. And the people who helped us transform these policy principles to guiding principles were volunteers from our CAV COP. We received help from members from our Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, North Carolina DOT, Indiana DOT, Colorado DOT, Wisconsin, Connecticut, Minnesota, Texas, and Washington. And truly their commitment and dedication to getting us to where we are is the only reason we got there. So we are very thankful for all the help our volunteers from our CAB COP do. So to go into a little bit of what our policy or our guiding principles are, we'll start with safety. Safety as the foundation. Safety on our end in operations is always going to be our #1 priority. And this also aligns with the AASHTO's presidential emphasis. In practice, this means being transparent with safety actions and promoting the open exchange of learned lessons. The next principle is future is connected and automated. And in practice, this means encouraging the investment in new technology and encouraging revamping outdated technology. #3, a unified national vision requires strong federal leadership, innovation, and preservation of state roles. In practice, this means encouraging a national vision that meets requirements and needs of our current transportation system and infrastructure. And then we have #4, promoting data sharing that preserves data privacy and security. In practice, this means preserving data and privacy within data security. Once this is finalized, I can elaborate more a little bit on all of this with you all, but otherwise we'd be here forever talking about this alone. But #5, we have advanced access and connection. In practice, this means promoting the expansion of mobility and access. At AASHTO, we look for the opportunity to cement these principles further. In a recent act, in this was AASHTO responding to the request for information RFI on information research ideas to support nationwide automated vehicle deployment. This was an RFI that was sent out. AASHTO made the response, and we also sent it out to all of our members to get their input as well. Once this document is finalized, it'll be accessible on our emerging mobility resources page. You'll be able to find our original policy principles there as well. If you look up emerging mobility areas AASHTO, it'll be the first thing to pop up. But I do encourage going and checking it out. It is a wealth of knowledge. We have a lot of different areas on there. Shared mobility is also on there. Next, we have the 2026 Resurface Transportation Reauthorization Priorities. Congress should support research for CAV technologies and their development and deployment. Congress should support the creation of CAV federal governance framework for development in, sorry guys, my screen's glitching. Okay, there we go. CEV federal government governance framework for development and deployment. This framework should include national data standards that ensures the national interoperability of these technologies. Congress should improve the procurement process to ensure DOTs can procure and deploy these technologies in a manner that keeps pace with the fast nature deployment of CAVs. So what does this mean? What do these policies mean for state DOTs? Federal guidance for DOT CAV deployment and development, ample research and information available to DOTs to make data-driven decisions about CAVs and development and deployment. And finally, the ability to utilize federal funds to procurement and deploy these technologies in a timely manner. This is something that we received a lot of help with from our policy expert here on our safety and mobility side. So we're very thankful. And then moving on to state updates. So we will start with UDOT. Utah DOT is leading the Connecting the West CTW program, one of the 3 US DOT saving lives with connectivity grants. UDOT is partnered with Colorado and Wyoming DOTs, leveraging their existing deployments and experiences. UDOT plans on using LiDAR at 20 signalized intersections to detect VRUs and warn drivers of their presence. All 3 states are expanding the use of various V2X applications that are already being used. We have a couple other Western states who are doing similar projects as well. In terms of AV, District Department of Transportation here in DC did a proposed rulemaking for AV testing earlier this year. And then Waymo also began their testing and mapping in the District of Columbia to start that process. DDOT published this rulemaking prior to that. So if you're ever in DC, you will see the Waymo vehicles driving around. And then in Texas, autonomous drivers, Texas has a couple autonomous vehicle deployments. They have autonomous drivers in commercial motor vehicles and in rideshare. They have been deployed in select areas of their state. They also have AV operators that are interested in receiving information in a standard format on traffic control changes for roads they travel. So lane closures, lane shifts, lane narrowing, and to my understanding, there is a preference to have this data within 24 hours or 24 hours in advance of it happening. And then moving on, we have our AASHTO partners. So we have AVIA, the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association. We have our CV Pool Fund study, which is coordinated with Virginia DOT. And then we have AV Pool Fund. Well, that was CV Pool Fund study. AV Pool Fund study is with Ohio DOT. And then we have the V2X cohort that is JPO FHWA. And that is a monthly meeting. Oh, sorry, I realized my screens weren't moving. Sorry. All of these, I have a lot of links in here that you should be able to click on. This is the DDOT updates and then Texas. And then here we have our AASHTO partners. So AVIA, CV, Pool Fund, AV Pool Fund, and then V2X cohort. V2X cohort is a monthly meeting that is held by JPO and FHWA, where they do updates on state deployments and where states are in the process. And then finally, there we go. We have our resources page. So on this resource page, you can find our CV policy principles from 2021. NOCO on our operations team just did a V2X report. I highly encourage everyone taking a look at that. That one is very interesting. We have our NCHRP 2024-147, identifying best practices for automated driving systems and other emerging technologies report. We just did the peer exchange for that back in March, and they are getting ready to release the final report here in the near future. But I put a link to the project, which is where you should be able to find the final report when it's ready. And then we have a PRC update from the new technical committee, Road Infrastructure for Connected and Automated Mobility. And then we have the ITS America Automated Vehicle Policy Framework. I highly encourage giving that a look as well. That one covers quite a bit, and it also is relatively new. But yeah, other than that, that is really all I have for today. But I highly encourage partaking in our CAV COP if you ever want to learn more about what other states are doing.
Thank you so much, Mireya. And please do put in the chat any questions that you have for Mireya for later on. Next, we will hear from Alan Davis. Alan currently serves as the Director of the Operations Division with the Georgia Department of Transportation, and he's overseeing GDOT's Office of Traffic Operations, Maintenance, Utilities, and Transportation Data. Alan is a graduate of the University of South Carolina, a licensed professional engineer in Georgia and South Carolina, and a professional traffic operations engineer. Alan, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Just a quick yes that you can see the right screen.
Yep.
Yes, looks good.
Always have to ask. Thank you again for allowing me to come and share with you. I too will be coming at this from much of the operations side of things, since my title suggests. So there you go. Just a quick little overview of GDOT if you're not familiar with us as an agency. About 18,000 miles of state routes in Georgia. The department itself is just over 4,000 employees. We actually maintain some rail. We are a more centralized agency compared to all the other DOTs that are out there, but spread across 7 different districts with our headquarters here in Atlanta, where I sit now. And it is, as we were talking earlier, cold, but warming up here soon. Within GDOT and within the world that I sit in within GDOT, one of the offices that I get to work over is our Office of Traffic Operations, where a lot of this interaction with connected and autonomous vehicles happens. This is a part of our organization where we have a lot of our travel information, 511, our travel information system we call Navigator, and that's where really the nexus of a lot of the flow of information internally and externally happens for the department. A lot of our arterial management programs that we call SIGOPS, and oftentimes a lot of everything else gets in there as well. We have our HSIP program as well. We have a lot of our permitting functions, and our CAV work exists within this team. This part of the agency and a lot of this work we did really got its start back in the Olympics when they were in Atlanta in 1996. It's when we opened up our transportation management center, and it's been operating 24/7 since. And it's really been an incubator for a lot of the necessity of deployments and infrastructure and applications to manage and operate our roadways in Georgia. The growth in the Atlanta area, as well as the state of Georgia as well, freight movement, freight mobility at large has been dependent a lot on us taking advantage of and investing in technology and solutions like that, to which CAV space is going to be a growing part of. And this is where a lot within GDOT that overlap will occur, and that connection is happening today. So to talk a little bit about AVs in Georgia, we as an agency deploy and operate 0 AVs. That's not necessarily where we are and what we exist to do, and not necessarily in our space, but we did work with the Georgia legislature to move forward legislation several years ago that was really broadly enabling legislation for the operation of autonomous vehicles within Georgia. And that came about in a lot of different ways. There were a lot of bills that were coming forward, some of them very restrictive. Some of them wanted to favor certain operators and things like that. But we felt on the DOT side that it was important to have more of a laissez-faire approach to regulation on AVs, and that is to broadly allow them. So there are a couple provisions in the law that passed in 2017 that enabled operations of AVs in Georgia, and you can kind of see some of the things that were here. What legally are AVs, and don't need a driver's license necessarily if there's not necessarily somebody driving the vehicle. So on and so forth, some higher operational and insurance requirements, things like that. You need to follow federal standards and things. But generally speaking, the legislation here is come and go, operate your vehicle. We don't need to be, as an agency or anywhere within the state, necessarily notified that you're operating an AV in Georgia. So that's been kind of an interesting operation to see that occur. But I will say that of the AVs that are currently operating in Georgia, which I'll go through in a minute, every time one comes within, they've let us know. They've given us a call. They've sat down. They usually say thanks for having some clean legislation that allows for the operation, and let us know exactly what we need to do. Here's what we're going to be doing and how, and we'll be in contact if there are issues or problems. So just to go through some of these, we've had a number of different local governments or venues operate the beep type vehicles that you see down there. Those are your personal shuttles and things like that, running short routes, fixed routes, and things like that. Those continue to grow in popularity in Georgia. Some of the first ones are in a town called Peachtree Corners, where they still operate several different versions of those over time up there today. This particular picture of one is down near, I believe, this may not be a picture of it, but it's operating over near the Braves Stadium here in Atlanta, the beep service. Waymo just recently in last year started operations here in Atlanta and steadily continues their expansion and operations in the metro area. It's hard to drive around Atlanta or walk around Atlanta and not see a Waymo in operation. And they've been fairly successful in that. They're, of course, in partnership with Uber. May Mobility is in the process of standing up their operations here in Atlanta as well, and a partnership with Lyft. And as well as May Mobility, we also have Zoox that is riding around and beginning their initial operations and mapping things like that. So here's just 4 examples of some major operations for personal vehicles and consumer level operations that are happening with AVs in Georgia. Each one of these has come to us and had some sort of interaction with us to let us know what's happening, what to expect, how to get in touch with them if there are issues. On top of all this, there are several different freight operators that have begun to show their interest in some level 4 operations in Georgia. Most of them still retain a safety driver for their operations, but given the freight volume and things that come out of the Port of Savannah, there's a lot of interest in some of that AV freight operations in Georgia. And again, this is all made possible because of I think a light touch on regulation, and the close partnership we can have with these companies as they begin to operate AVs. Some of the things we've had to deal with and consider as these things, and this isn't just something in Georgia, this is a bit of a national thing, and how we operate our roadways and things like that, is thinking about all of our assets in terms of what they would be, not only for a human driver, but also for a autonomous driver. Typically, we've seen a lot of the pavement markings or signage or things like that are needed for AVs. If they benefit a robot, they would also benefit a human. Higher contrast, better retro reflectivity, things like that, and informing some of those standards back to how those things need to perform. Our traffic signals being consistent in their operation and display, not having things that are unique or confusing that are out there. And you think about signs, we see the school sign that I have up here. We locally may have a good idea about what the school time should be of when children are actually present, but a AV in their driving domain probably doesn't necessarily know that children are present in a school. There's not that logic that you can connect there necessarily, unless they really are, sentient. And then we may have a bit of a different conversation about AVs. And so we have to kind of think about some of our sign placements of things like school zones that have clear markings that a computer vision system could interpret. So that uniformity and consistency is more important than ever. I participate in the National Committee for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is a great group of people who spends a lot of time arguing about should, shall, or may in the MUTCD. But that consistency that enables and empowers that document of the MUTCD is so much more important when you have this different type of driver operating on your roadways. Looking at things like contrast markings and consistency with those, and again, the signs, it's way more valuable and way more important for us to apply that approach to our implementation of those types of things from the design, construction, and maintenance life cycle of these facilities. Then we have to think about some of the digital side of this things too. There's now, and most of these AVs now operate within their own little bubble. They don't necessarily interact with any information that we generate from infrastructure, both directly or over the network. But there's a potential for several in the future that will want that kind of redundancy for things like traffic signals that we've heard from them in our conversations. And also whenever we have work zones and things like that. Just a few weeks ago, we had some videos sent to us about some Waymos that had some interesting operations during a not so clearly delivered work zone on a local road, and that interaction and how we need to deal with that. And to Waymo's credit, they're engaging with us on how we can both sides of the conversation improve on that space. But that is a part of the infrastructure and how we operate it that we need to have consideration because of the AV operations on our roadways. Building on top of that, we hope for a future too where the connected and autonomous, the C and the A kind of blend together, and there's a continued desire and need for direct communications from our infrastructure. That's something we certainly invested a lot in Georgia. We have over 2,300 roadside units or RSUs deployed across the state, largely here in the metro Atlanta area, but also down in Savannah near the port down there. And of course, we initially began deploying all this and hope for private sector vehicles to be able to ingest, use this data and infrastructure for a number of drastic safety improvement functions. But if you've been following that space at all, we know we've been waiting a bit for the private OEM market to deploy this technology in vehicles. So today we take advantage of it to support a lot of public sector fleet applications, a freight signal priority, transit signal priority, emergency vehicle preemption, things like that, serving our own fleets and their benefits that are there. As we think about that too, and as that broadens out, we broadcast this information, like from a traffic signal, for example, directly to vehicles. So you can receive it through roadside units, but also we take data for applications that might necessarily not have that time sensitivity to third-party partners, and we need to always consider that from a data standpoint, from this infrastructure and how it operates and performs, whether or not it needs to, what quality, what level of detail and things it needs to be set up. And so that's our application of this information to support the human drivers, AVs, a combination thereof, technologies now and into the future. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like, and how we've used this and leveraged this, I'll focus on transit signal priority first. We have a few different examples here. The one on the left of your screen that is down in Savannah, supporting some of their routes to provide increased or improved reliability for their transit operations. Excuse me. And what that means is that there's a certain parameter where they want their headways between buses to be on time. And so if they're running late, we'll enable transit signal priority for them. If they're on time, we will disable it. And again, here, this in the middle of your screen is another application of that here in Metro Atlanta, as well as on the right, that's supporting a bus rapid transit system. It's an entirely new layer as part of this. So transit signal priority is not a new concept. It's been around for a while, but this implementation through V2X and the 5.9 spectrum to deliver it through this direct interaction is an added layer of things we need to consider from the infrastructure to support these critical functions for transit operations. Apply that as well to freight. It's a little bit different of a paradigm where you're not necessarily giving conditional priority, but it's just giving it based on the vehicle type. Again, trying to move those freight vehicles through these intersections more quickly without having to stop because of the amount of congestion and energy and efficiency that you lose in that constant stopping and starting of these heavy vehicles. And also giving them direct alerts of conditions that may affect their routing and for certain safety outcomes. Here in Savannah, there's a number of at-grade rail crossings that get blocked by some leaky trains at times. And when trucks trying to go in and out of the port are trying to navigate that and get around, they sometimes will make some risky maneuvers to get around blocked crossings. So if we can do things to directly give them information either directly through infrastructure or through third-party applications. That information ahead of time allows them to make better decisions in terms of routing. And what that gets us, some of the measured benefits from freight, we've seen in the limited pilots, we've done some pretty substantial improvements, 15 to 20% reduction in emissions, 5-10% in fuel reduction in fuel consumption, a number of stops reducing as well, and travel time improvements. Transit, we've seen on some of our more studied routes we've done and deployments, like so pretty substantial improvements in on-time performance. You can see upwards of 10% improvements, which from my friends in the transit industry tell me is incredible to see that kind of on-time performance improvement through those routes. So just these things we need to consider as we build this out, operate it, and think through it, and deploy and operate and maintain the technology on these systems. Finally, I'll touch on some of the broader infrastructure we think we need to deploy out to better support the connected and autonomous vehicles of the future. These are some design build projects that we have going on right now called Building the Digital Interstates. And this is a pretty robust fiber optic and connected vehicle roadside unit deployment along our interstates. We've broken this work up into 5 large design build projects, 2 of which are under construction, the 3rd of which was just recently awarded. And this is building out some fiber optic infrastructure along all the interstates in Georgia. So it's a substantial expansion of our technology and deployment along our interstates. Building on this infrastructure to support operations for connected and autonomous vehicles today, broader ITS coverage today, and supporting commercialization efforts within the right of way and now and into the future. So, we're using a lot of these assets and this fiber optic bandwidth today to support our traffic management functions. But this gives us a broad base of capacity from a technology standpoint in the future as more and more of these CAVs begin to operate on our roadways, and there's more need for data interaction, both directly with infrastructure as well as with third parties. And lastly, just looking at all these assets that we have out here and the data they're generating, we need to think about their performance as well. Each one of those is generating data for us, ITS devices, traffic signals, our connected vehicle infrastructure, AVs themselves, lots of data and things that we need to consider and how to manage data and make it something that's actionable for us. And that applies down to things we need to do from a data governance, maintain data, and think about the quality of the data, especially if it's something that third parties or partners can take advantage of in the future. With that, I'll say thanks and pass it along, and appreciate y'all letting me come in and join y'all today.
Thank you so much, Alan, for that presentation. And again, please enter any questions that you have for Alan or for Mireya in the chat. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Randy Iwasaki as our last speaker. And Randy brings more than 40 years of experience in the transportation sector, where he has served in leadership roles for both public and private sector organizations and serves on several boards in an advisory capacity or as a board member. He's an internationally recognized leader in transportation research and innovation. And I'd be remiss if I don't also say that Randy is also the chair of TRB's Executive Subcommittee on International Activities. So if you're interested, TRB International Activities, please attend his meeting there. So Randy, I'm going to turn it all to you now.
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out how to get my presentation. I just had it. Oh, here it is. Can you see my presentation okay?
Yes, it looks great.
Great. Thank you to AASHTO and Iana and Christos for inviting me to participate today. I have a little experience with the AV-CV world. I used to work for Caltrans a long time ago, and we got the first AV test grant, the Automated Highway System grant back in the late 80s. And it culminated in San Diego in 97 with a test of Buick vehicles driving hands off wheel, feet off pedal, guided by binary coded magnets embedded in the pavement. And then later on, I went to work for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And so some of this here is some information from Grant. So I apologize if you've already seen some of these slides, but I think they're pertinent for today's discussion. We're talking about the sharing economy. I got this slide from Dr. Susan Shaheen. She's a good friend. She teaches at UC Berkeley. It kind of depicts the sharing economy, and transportation now is included in that. And this is a Venn diagram on the left in orange, if that's the color that you see, the core and incumbent services. And on the right, innovative services that have cropped up over time. And in the middle, it's kind of a cross between the two. And I focused on casual carpooling only because in the West Coast, it's called casual carpooling, but on the East Coast, it's called slugging. This phenomenon started at Bob's Big Boy in Virginia, and it was passengers lining up in a line next to a bus stop, but not getting on the bus. And they would get into a car would drive up, two strangers would get in the car, and they would take off for Washington, D.C. And bus drivers coined the term, they're slugs, they're fake bus riders. And so slugging on the East Coast, but on the West Coast, it was casual carpooling. And really took off. And then when Uber was introduced in San Francisco, people would say, there's no way I'm getting in a car with a complete stranger. But yet casual carpooling had been around for years. And so we've proven that people will get into a car with a complete stranger to do shared mobility. And also for Waymos here, I've been here for a while, and I've taken it a few times. When we first introduced Waymo into San Francisco, you felt like a rock star because everybody's taking your picture because you're driving around in a car with no driver. So when I was at Contra Costa Transportation Authority, I was there for almost 11 years. We got a US DOT ATC MTD grant to build a mobility as a service platform. If you want shared mobility, you're going to have a platform that binds your trip from point A to point B. It could be a multi-source trip into one application. And that was the idea. And this is San Francisco. So this congestion is bad. This is the worst in the Bay Area. It's Interstate 80 heading toward San Francisco on the right. So that's westbound, or eastbound here on 80 on the left side. And the traffic is back. It's this bad today. And transit ridership is down. So a lot of people are taking single occupant vehicles in and out of San Francisco. And one of the reasons why I think it is, and this is maybe not a measurement that you normally do in TPM, but personal safety is a big issue for riders on BART. And so when I take people with me and we point out some of the situations that occur that make people not feel so safe, I think we should focus a lot on not only crash data, but also personal safety data as well, if we're going to get people into shared autonomous mobility. So this is the definition of MOS. You can read it as well as I can. And we're excited about getting that grant to build an app. The first phase was to build an app along Interstate 680 to test it. And then second phase was to build it out for Contra Costa County. But the third phase was to build out for the 9 Bay Area counties. One application, end-to-end, start to finish ridership, and protecting those points between the various modes for, we call it connection protection. So make sure that when you get off of BART, the bus is waiting for you. So you're an authorized rider. The bus stays a little bit longer to pick me up. And as Alan was explaining about TSP, you can keep that bus on schedule by changing the signal timing. And if the bus is empty today, the system knows that as well, and it won't change the signal timing because there's no sense in keeping an empty bus on schedule. These are the applications on the left, and the application for the mobility as a service platform I was interested in most was rewards and incentives. I'm a flyer that only flies one airline, and then US DOT offered me a chance to come to Washington to do a ARPA-I event. And if I wasn't going to fly my airline, I wasn't going to go. At my age, I just want to fly the same airlines and get the points and then get upgrades. Well, how come we can't do the same in mobility? And so we started focusing in on rewards and incentives for surface transportation. You know, the right side, I think that's still a complete list of the various assets that you combine together on your trip. And the US DOT like mobility on demand. Europe likes MOS, or mobility as a service. These are the differences, kind of in a nutshell, between MOD and MOS. And the trends that are driving mobility as a service or mobility on demand. Somebody asked me once, what do you think, what have you seen as the greatest tool to innovate in transportation? Is it the locomotive? Is it the steam engine? And my response, and still is my response, is it's the smartphone. And so with that, you have connectivity in your pocket. Uber and Lyft wouldn't be around today if they didn't have that kind of connectivity. And so that smart device, Steve Jobs did a great job, not only selling a lot of Apple iPhones and other smartphones now today, but just creating the opportunity for innovation in our transportation area. And there's a lot more automated transportation possibilities. But I think on the right is very important. We have an application that we got another grant at Contra Costa Transportation Authority. But over the next 30 years, our population is going to grow. And it's going to be more in the urbanized areas. And by 2045, you're going to increase the average age here. We're getting older as a society. So how do you provide mobility services? I'm getting older. And when I speak to UC Berkeley students, I said, I'm depending on you to provide options for me to travel when I can't see, or I don't have the same reflexes, and I need to provide, I want to go see my grandchildren or a movie, and I don't have a car anymore. So you got to help me out. So that's why I spend time at talking to college students, is because I'm really mean it. I mean, we need to figure out a way of providing better services to our elderly folks in America. So we did get an automated driving system grant, the ADS grant. We were one, I think, of 8 grantees in the United States, and was to test automated vehicles. I imported the first 2 level 3 shuttles. There were Easy Mouse shuttles built in BC, France by hand. Through NHTSA, I got National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I got the first 2 waivers to the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard. And I checked the wrong box, said it was going to be operated on private roads, and we were going to operate on public streets. And so I had to make amends with NHTSA, but ultimately got the 2 waivers, got the first 2 licenses in California to operate on public streets. It was rumored I was crying when CBS News was with me in that shuttle. I wasn't sure I got something in my eye, but they had Las Vegas, RTC of Southern Nevada, imported a Navia a year later, tested it a very short period of time, and they rolled it out a couple days before we rolled out ours. And 2 hours later, theirs got hit by a bus or a truck, and ours, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, is still operating those shuttles today. We have to do better on the manufacturing of these shuttles. They wear out too fast, but they're a great opportunity to start testing shared mobility. And so these were the goals that we submitted. You're going to get better data collection. You talked about privacy. In those days, we were worried about privacy. It was more about how do we collect that data? How do we store that data? And then how do we analyze that data? And it was an unprecedented mobility options, and then shared mobility. That's what we were really focused on. How do we incentivize? How do we provide better options for shared mobility? And this one is not really relevant to today's discussion, but it was, what kind of technology do we need to help support shared autonomous vehicles and autonomous vehicles on our freeway system and roadway system? But really, for the first, as I said, I'm getting older, and that we have a gated community in Walnut Creek. It's called Rossmore, and there's 6,600 or 6,700 homes, 10,000 residents. The average age is 77. It's about an 1,800-acre facility, a perfect test facility to see the user acceptance from the elderly. What do we need to provide them to get them onto those shared mobility options? And so we've run that pilot, Contra Costa has run that pilot now for a couple of years. I've been gone. 4 years ago, I retired. I left Contra Costa. And now I'm working with students at UC Berkeley to come up with a survey to get the user acceptance numbers, to understand what they need now that they've gone through a couple of years cycle of riding in this vehicle. Is it going to where they want it to go? Can you hail it in the right way? So that information is being gathered today. That survey is being developed. And so I'm excited to see the results of that. But again, we were trying to figure out ways of providing better options for the elderly. And if you ever get a chance, you can watch a documentary called Moving San Francisco. And the interview that we did with, so I founded a Momentum Station back in 2013 when I was at CCTA, and it was the largest secure autonomous vehicle testbed at the time. And so we brought about 10 elderly people out from Rossmore, and they got to ride in that shuttle. And so their interview is on that documentary. And it's pretty funny. And then I gave a speech about AV/CV technology at the LA City Hall. It's a beautiful building there. I think it was on the 23rd floor in the tower area. And it was taped for C-SPAN. And so the Dr. Troy Kaji at the county hospital in Martinez called me, and he's after the interview, and he said, "Hey, I want some of those SAVs to provide mobility options for our customers at the county hospital." And they surveyed people that missed their appointments, and they said, "We don't have reliable transportation, or we don't have good access to transportation." Again, another performance measurement. And so ultimately, they're running a Presto. It's a modified Toyota Sienna minivan on a 5-mile loop to try to get people back to give them options to get to the hospital. Because if you think about it, they don't get care when the issue is minor and it becomes major and they end up in the hospital. It's going to cost somebody about $10,000 to $20,000 a stay. And the doctor's schedules are messed up, so they overbook, and that's why it's just a mess. So if you can have more orderly appointments, you make your appointment, you get the care you need. I think this is very important for us in the transportation area to provide that service. And then lastly, when you get these very complex handoffs, you need to start creating these shared mobility hubs so that people know where to go. You can make that handoff seamlessly. You protect the connection between the modes, and it's more reliable. So people then will start taking that as other options. These are some resources that are available for shared mobility, and so hopefully you get a chance to read some of that. So thank you very much for inviting me today to participate in this event.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, everyone. Why don't we have all of our panelists and Christos and Anna, if you'd like to join, just put your cameras on for the panel discussion and Q&A. So why don't we start with Christos had a question. So Christos, why don't you ask the question of the panel?
Thank you, Yana. And of course, when we first started having our own project here in Rhode Island on AVs, Randy was the first person I called. Randy, we gotta do this. What can you teach me in a couple of hours? That way we don't step on everything. So, and some of the lessons that we've learned is that, particularly as a small transportation agency, it is very difficult for us to stay up with technology if technology keeps changing and we need to be reinvesting all the time for that. So, so the one thing that we know is that technology becomes obsolete very quickly with new technologies coming up. So how can state DOTs afford to stay in the game with V2X and the connected, autonomous mobility as we are defining it, and really still be able to, deliver on the rest of our mission?
Who wants to go first?
I can. Just from our perspective, since we've made such a sizable investment in connected technology and infrastructure, I'll say that there's just a couple points of that. One, broadly speaking, the technology and things that we use and scale of our overall agency budget, it's small. It's not a costly investment. So that's one part of it. It's a relatively cheap investment, especially if you consider the what you get out of it and the outcomes you get of it. Secondly, a lot of the things that go into V2X to support something like that, for example, are investments that have compounding benefits elsewhere. So, for example, if you want to put connected technology at a traffic signal, well, I need to go upgrade my traffic signal cabinet and controller and software. Well, those are things that you probably should be doing anyways to have better active management of your arterials and safer outcomes at your intersection. So there's a lot of compounding investment that's there. That's not just the V2X infrastructure itself. And then, shoot, forgot my last point because it was probably the best one, but those two things certainly come to mind, is that it's a relatively cheap investment, especially considering the outcomes you get, and the investments you make in it are useful in so many other parts of safety and operations. And I remember my last point, technology is something that we as agencies need to think about on a life cycle basis, not like we do bridges or roads. These aren't things that need to exist and operate for 10, 15, 20 years. Technology does operate on a 3 to 5 year cycle, maybe less. And so we need, with the pace of innovation that's there, we need to think about those assets, and that kind of life cycle is much shorter and a much more frequent investment and turnover.
Ellen, just and add a question for that, which is, how are you finding your agency's ability to keep up with the changes in technology? If it is, let's say, every other year as the average turnover rate.
Sure. So, I mean, you have to make some mindful investment in that. You don't buy the latest iPhone every year necessarily. Some people do. But we have to be mindful of that and weigh the risks and things like that, and really understand from industry and from partners and other agencies about what the value is of, like, yes, this is an investment that does have meaningful outcomes. And I'll certainly plug AASHTO's engagement with all of our members and the value that those relationships have and those partnerships with one another, as well as organizations like ITS America, ITE, and all the various trade organizations that help inform us to make those decisions, as well as, okay, this is the investment we need to take. This isn't something necessarily fix our overall plan, our strategic goals and objectives, etc.
Randy?
Well,
Yes.
So Christos, the first answer is TRB. TRB has a lot of resources that are focused on AV, CAV, and SAV technologies. Jane Lappin has a conference every year that is focused on autonomous vehicles. I have been lucky enough to be invited. We used to have a reunion every year on the Automated Highway System program. Now it's attached to before the ITS World Congress starts. So this year in Atlanta, on Saturday, you had countries from all over, countries making presentations on the status of connected automated mobility. So those are some very good resources. When we first started testing a Nissan, I had a panel set up. Nissan was the representative because they were doing some testing with AV technology. And I asked Toshi, what do you need from state DOTs? And he said, I just need a center line. Because if I expected you all to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into infrastructure, it wouldn't work. And so I've always just focused on a good center line. I think in California, we changed the spec to 6 inches wide. And then the third thing is open architecture. You want a standard architecture so that when you ingest that data, and it may not be you ingesting the data, it may be a third party ingesting that data. I think what any local or state DOT wants is better information. And that's really, I think, the holy grail at the end of the day is get predictive analytics on where you have hotspots. Now you can do some really good investments in not your whole system, but where the information is telling you that you have a problem. And so that's really kind of both statewide and locally. When I worked in the public sector, that's what we were focused on: better information, getting the data in a format that we can use and that others can use, because we do share data statewide and locally on like crash information and things like that.
Mireya, is this a topic that you're seeing in the AASHTO groups that you're involved in?
Yeah, this is something that is brought up every so often, more often than not, honestly. And a lot of prior to the administrative shifts we've seen this year, a lot of people were using federal grants and like the SMART grant programs and things of that nature to fund a lot of their V2X projects. I know larger states that have um, a little bit more money to allocate to it without the funding go a different route, but I know I'm 99% sure that's how UDOT joined that connectivity group. And I know that there's some other states that are doing it as well, but with the shifts and the pauses that we are seeing right now, it's not something I think they're doing currently, but it is something they could potentially bring back in the future. But I'm always keeping my eyes and ears open so I can keep everyone updated when I learn more.
Thank you. So Warren Henry has a question. On a related note, how does the panel feel about the current state of market penetration as it relates to CAV equipment and state government's continued investment in field devices? Alan, shall we start with you?
It's depressing. That's how I feel. That's been a ongoing thing, and I don't know if we have enough time to really dive into that ongoing saga, especially from the C side, the V2X side. We're often told that it's a chicken and egg problem from the auto industry about connectivity deployment. And I'll quote Blaine Leonard from UDOT on this, that well, we've got the chicken and we've laid an egg on the agency side, and we're still waiting for deployment and vehicles. So the market penetration piece is a challenge, and we keep hoping and hearing rumors and things like that, and news and investments and things like that, that it's just around the corner. But from that perspective, that's why we've pivoted in the last several years from the V2X side to focus more on our fleets and our applications in the public sector, things we have control over, lots of aftermarket deployments, things like that. Other agencies have had success in a lot of different ways related to that. And then from the Navy perspective, I guess that market penetration does continue to grow a bit. It's a bit of a different relationship with agencies.
Thanks, Alan. Let's see. I have a two-part question for all of you. So one is, I have both of my kids live in San Francisco, so I've been there regularly. And in this past year, my feeling about the real possibility of autonomous vehicles having being on the roads and being everywhere changed, because in San Francisco, you ride Waymos and many people are using Teslas in, self-driving mode. We got a chance to do that. But when I talk to people here in Boston about it, most people still don't believe it. Because, as Randy explained, we've been at it for a long time and people aren't seeing it. And so it feels to the average person like it's way still, down the road and almost like unattainable. So I guess the first part of the question is, what do you feel is needed to get more of the public to understand and believe that this is real and is something that they will be experiencing? And then the second part of the question is, what's your view of, let's say in the next 5 years, how much autonomous vehicles will we see in the US? And is it only in niche markets, or is it going to be across the board? Who wants to go first?
I'll try.
Okay.
So for your first part, Hiana, the question, So we hosted the ITS World Congress in San Francisco in 2005. And we made a decision to change the way the World Congress is operated. It used to be in a conference center talking about all this great stuff that we were going to do. And we ended up hosting an outdoor showcase. We took parking lot number 3 at Pac Bell Park. And we brought in 2 vehicles that talked to them, 2 BMWs that were talking to each other, talking about how they're going to, one skidded on a piece of, we put water on a piece of visqueen, and the one BMW slid out, and the other one was talking, the other one slick spot ahead, 50 feet, 40 feet, 30 feet. And then we opened it up to the public, which got liability issues, but we wanted the people, because it's hard for me to talk to you about how self-driving vehicles would work in those days. So I just put you in one, and then all of a sudden you get it. And so what about safety? Well, 40,000 people are killed on our roadways every year. Now, I think we made a dent in that. But one of my points to the audience, I gave a speech one time, and I said, what happens if next year we have enough penetration of self-driving vehicles in our inventory in the United States, and our fatality rate goes from 40,000 to 20, and 10,000 are caused by computer error? Is that a good year or is that a bad year? And they said, well, one guy raised his hand, that's statistically impossible. But the point is, we say it's okay for human error, but it's not okay for computer error. And I think some of that is changing. We're making a little fun of some of the detours that these vehicles make, or they get stuck in certain areas, but so do humans. So that's, I think, the toleration level there, at least in my experience of having been involved in that, I've seen a change. So the world, I think the way we approach our demonstrations, we can be more outward facing with the technology so that people get aware of that. I think, as I mentioned in San Francisco, when I first got into Waymo, I thought I was a rock star because they're taking my picture and I'm waving, but there's no driver. They're not taking me, they're taking the car, and they can't believe there's no driver, as you mentioned when you went to San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I think the other area that we haven't talked about is rural. You need to figure out a way, not only just urban deployment, rural deployment, because there's a lot of needs in the rural parts of, everybody thinks California is highly populated, and it is, but it's all urbanized. But most of California is still rural. And so we have to figure out a way of accessing the technology to do that. And every 5 years, they ask me, when are self-driving vehicles going to be, at a certain point, a statistically good number to reduce the accident rate? I think it boils down to cost. And so you got to figure out a better way of building these vehicles and have the comm centers. Because I sat in the driver's seat one time. You don't do that in a Waymo. It's like the guy got on, I think, hey, Randy, you can't sit in that seat. So I had to go in the back. And then, but you figure, wow, how many people are behind the scenes that are supporting this system? Right, and so the VC money is going to eventually run out. It's going to have to be like transit. It's going to have to figure out a way of making the revenue at the fare box. So I think in 5 years, they'll figure that out, with electric vehicles getting less and less in cost, the technology getting more refined, and the centerline stripings are better.
Anybody else with an opinion?
I had some initial thoughts. Your question reminded me of 2 things. One, when I first started AASHTO, and they sent me to my first autonomous vehicle conference. It was arts, and it was in San Diego, and someone posed the question in one of the sessions, which probably now realizing not the most uncommon question, but at the time, being new, really shaped my thoughts on autonomous vehicles. And the question was more, at what point are autonomous vehicles safe, and how do we get there? Do we have them drive like an autonomous vehicle and have them drive and follow the rules to a T? Or do we have them drive like a human driver and allow them to make error so that way they blend into the roadway better? Because you still have human drivers. And that was an interesting question to enter the autonomous vehicle space with. And then as I've gone on in this space with our CAV community of practice, we had Stephanie Dock with DDOT come and talk to us about how complex it is to have Waymo in DC, because we have some of the worst congestion. I believe we were number 5 a couple years ago in congestion in the United States. And on top of that, you have Maryland and Virginia so close. And Waymo, I believe, when we talked about it last time, Waymo wasn't allowed to be in Virginia or Maryland without a driver. And then you add the complexities of who owns what roads in DC. So you have federal roads, you have national park roads, you have privately owned roads, you have city roads, all in this tiny little broken diamond on the East Coast. And so it's interesting. To your question, I think public outreach is going to be key on the acceptance of it. It's going to be really hard because I'm from Arizona originally, and in Arizona, you go, Waymos are everywhere.
Mhm.
And I think it's really hard to explain that Waymos aren't bad to even people I know personally outside of work. I think it's hard to explain, like, Waymos aren't bad. You just have to put a little trust, but also understand that geographically, like, they're going to do a little bit better on the West Coast, Southwest, because there's more land for them to operate and they're not tight, tiny roads. But I mean, eventually we'll get to a point where I think, yeah, it'll be fine. But I think it's a lot of public trust, honestly, and a personal Mireya opinion, not an AASHTO opinion. It is, I think public trust is going to be the big selling point.
Yeah, I've heard people say, well, I think I would trust an autonomous vehicle if it was all autonomous vehicles, but because I can't foresee a time when it's all AV, that I don't see how we can get there, as a view.
I mean, if people just followed the road laws, then
Mhm.
autonomous vehicles would blend in perfectly. But that is not
Mhm.
our reality.
Yeah.
I have an example. This is a long time ago. It's one of my first times to visit Google in Mountain View, the headquarters. And I was amazed at the free lunch. You could have any kind of whatever you wanted, free lunch, get a haircut there. But I went there to take a ride on. It was in those days it was a Lexus SUV. It was a RX 350, I think. And we're driving along. The bicycle riders in front of us. And the bicycle riders going whatever bicycle riders go, maybe 10 miles an hour, 8 miles, whatever the number was. And that car would not pass. And it was we just going around at 8 miles an hour following this bicycle until finally they peeled off and then the car went back to 35 miles an hour. So in those cases, you probably want a ODD or something that says it's okay to edge around, because that's what a human would. They would just edge around. Otherwise, the place is not going to work right. If you have a bunch of bicyclists holding back all these cars. And then in those days, the car would shake, would stutter, because it saw the shadows of windy day, that trees are shadowing across the pavement, and it didn't know what it was. So I asked the operator, what's happening? Why is the car shaking like that? And they said it's scared. Well, I think today the cars have learned so much, they're not as scared as they used to be. So when humans are scared, I think the computers are scared as well. So you got to provide better information. You got to do your testing and make sure that those things work, and then provide the best environment for them to operate in.
Mhm. All right, I'm going to take us back to the topic of this webinar, which is kind of autonomy and transportation performance management. And when I think about the possibility, I see it in two folds. One, and I'm sure there are even more, but one is the data collection opportunity through autonomous vehicles, because just by the nature of an autonomous vehicle, you're now, as many people have said before, an autonomous vehicle is not a car anymore. It's basically a robot on wheels, or a computer on wheels. And so the data collection opportunities to be able to measure and monitor performance, I think, has tremendous potential. But the other is, if you have autonomy, are you better able to predict performance, like congestion, because we have a a better understanding of movement than human ways. Alan, you're nodding. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would tend to think so that the data and things we could get from a routing perspective from AVs and things like that would be tremendously valuable from a traffic management and congestion management, even safety standpoint. Having that depth of information about planned routes and things like that, or being able to influence them. I mean, driving alone is tricky, and the driving task, and humans are equally unpredictable and erratic when it comes to it. Just come drive in Atlanta, Georgia, if you want to experience some interesting driving choices that occur outside the bounds of the rules of the road. So that whole aspect, I think, is interesting, and that'd be a bit of interesting data and useful data in the future for agencies and their traffic management approaches.
I signed before I left Contra Costa, I signed a deal with Nissan. And the idea was, because their Leafs are going to be autonomous. And the idea is, you know where your choke points are. And so what happens is traffic is approaching that choke point, and then it goes too fast, and you fill up the funnel too quickly. And then you start backing up. And at least in my day, it used to be four to one for 1 minute of delay, it takes 4 minutes to clear. So 1 to 4 ratio. And so I signed a deal with Nissan that when you get to a certain level, percentage-wise, of Nissan Leafs, and this was on Interstate 680, heading southbound, where it went from 8 lanes to 6 lanes in Alameda County, and you had a backup every day. So slow the traffic down. So you do these calculations in all 8 lanes, the speed is X. And it's kind of like when you do integrated corridor management, you have the gantry across, and you'll run a selected number, 35 miles an hour, 28 miles an hour, 20, you're supposed to go that, but humans aren't going to do that. But self-driving vehicles will. And slow that platoon of vehicles, much like ramp metering, only do it mainline metering and do it with cars. And so slow that traffic down before it enters the choke point. And then you're going to hold that breakdown of that freeway off longer. And then your reliability. So you know it's from here to San Jose takes an hour, let's say it's 30 miles, or San Francisco airport, 38 miles from my house. I got to leave about 3:30 if I'm coming to DC to get through the Bay Bridge to the metering lights. So that only takes me an hour. Otherwise, if I leave later, it gets an hour and a half, 2 hours. And that's not right. So if you can make that, you're going to take an hour, if you can hold off all that other delay and keep it at an hour, I think people would have better appreciation of the work that now Alan and others do on the main line to provide a more reliable transportation system. So it's not, congestion is going to happen anyway, but how do you hold off that breakdown to make that congestion so where it fluctuates, and you just we can't figure out how long it's going to be. And so I think there's a place for self-driving vehicles, because Waymo has a comm center. They could slow that vehicle down. So can Nissan.
Yeah. Anna and Mireya, I guess with this topic, it leads me to think about what are things that AASHTO and your 2 committees can do to collaborate better so that the possibilities of improving transportation performance management through autonomous vehicles can be more quickly realized.
I don't know if you wanted to go more, and yeah, I think this gives us, I think doing things like this, first of all, is a good start, right? Like doing these kind of webinars and just having these conversations of what's kind of happening in this world. I think we sometimes have 2 different kind of groups of people that are working on these issues. And so how do we bring them together? How do we share best practices? And I think we probably need to do more of that. Because, I think a lot of autonomous vehicles, we're talking operations, we're talking getting them on the road. But what are we measuring, right? What are we measuring? How are we setting up systems to determine that they're delivering what we want, that they're, that we can track it, right? That we're collecting the right data. And how do we kind of, I guess I would say, and question, like, what can we be doing now? I think we have a whole, across the country, states and members on this call that are, at various places within this process of adopting autonomous vehicles. And like, I don't know, I guess I would wonder, like Randy or Alan, like, what would your advice be for, like, what steps should they be taking? What things should they be thinking about as they're kind of just either starting this process at the beginning? And I think AASHTO needs to kind of do a better job about that sharing of best practices and collaborating across committees. I don't know.
Mireya?
Yeah, I would just be curious, like, yeah, sorry, Maria, go ahead. But I am curious though, like Ellen, like, what would be your
Maybe
number one thing?
Mireya, you can add, and then maybe then we can have Randy and Alan respond.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with Anna on that. I think collaboration amongst committees is step one, and thankfully we have a couple opportunities to do so, which we can definitely start making that our reality. But I also think the information sharing is hard, and it's hard to know where everyone's at exactly without reaching out and asking, at least for me in my stance of trying to know where everyone's at. A lot of times I have to reach out to most of our states individually and ask, like, hey, haven't heard from you guys. Where are you at with this? Are you just watching? What's the game plan? Do you have one? Do we want to talk about it? I encourage you to join our groups. Kind of just trying to get that outreach going. I do know in terms of like the connectivity data sharing, I believe JPO is starting to build a map to kind of start the process. But I would be interested to know like where the testing is, to Anna's point of like where should we do the testing? What are the points? I've also been asking that question, and I would love to know what your guys' thoughts are on that as well, because I think that's a great starting point, at least for us here at AASHTO, to start asking, like, where are you guys at in these points? And what are your thoughts on expanding on it? And I think having a starting point is key. I've had a few, but they haven't really gotten me that far so far. So, I mean, any input or advice is always accepted on my end.
Alan, you're an AASHTO member. What's your response?
It is a real challenge. I'll certainly empathize on that with that. A lot of we're really bad about talking about the stuff we do outside of our own silos. As a DOT, sorry. That is, we are certainly guilty of it. But I think a lot of the great conversations that happen at events like AASHTO committee meetings, CTE, CTSO, even Committee on Safety around this space. There's a seriousness there that just take the safety perspective, to solve the safety challenge we have to embrace any and all tools available to a certain extent, and technology and CAVs are part of that. And the conversations that happen with agencies and peers at those events, directly and indirectly in the hallway. I mean, I think some of my best TRV experiences have been some of the ad hoc conversations I've had with peers in the hallway up at DC. So there's a lot of that, and I think empowering or engaging a lot of let's be honest, we're working with a bunch of engineers here, and we are not the best communicators in the world. So being able to have some very active communications folks who can get the message together and out about what we're doing and why, especially in this technology space, I think also helps. And truly doing the Lord's work and then facilitating a lot of the communication between these different agencies and the different verticals within these agencies that are working on this, that interaction, and doing what you can to bring it out of folks it's just a continuing task that I think we'll have to work through, especially with the turnover at agencies that exist. I mean, you get new people here all the time, so just instituting a lot of that culture of engagement and information sharing, I think, is just going to have to keep working. You are doing a great job at it, I will say that.
You're going to have to then pull in the Jill Highland from CKM to help with the knowledge. sharing. Um, Before we end, I wanted to give Warren Henry a chance. He had two kind of comment and questions. Warren, do you want to unmute yourself and both ask your question and make your comment? Are you there, Warren? Well, I can read it too. So
Yeah, hear me?
okay, yes, now we can hear you, Warren.
So yeah, I don't want to take you all back to the earlier part of the conversation since you wanted to move on. But when you brought the data um, topic up, from my perspective, a lot of AVs are coming out, and there's intentions for Waymo to come to DC and to maybe Maryland and all that. But if the AVs that come our way aren't also connected vehicles, then the data won't be available to us. And so I don't know if anyone has any knowledge about what's going on nationwide in terms of specific agreements or some kind of handshake agreement between OEMs and the states to actually have them or require them to ensure that the platforms are in place and they're maintained to have that data stream be continuous. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
My experience with negotiating for the data is a lot of that data is their comparative business advantage, and they don't want to give it up.
Right.
So we signed an agreement. I wasn't with Caltrans at the time. I was with Contra Costa Transportation Authority. We signed it with some of the testers out at the Momentum station to get information on performance. And so like in California, when we first allowed self-driving vehicles on our roadways, the DMV required anytime you disengage out of AV mode, you got to report it, which then, so that kind of turned off some of the testers for California. And so I think on one hand, if you're too stringent on your requirements, they don't want to come. And if you're not stringent enough, you don't get any information. And so if you're in the process of allowing vehicles to start testing in Maryland, you need your governor or somebody to weigh in and say, we want this basic information from you. We're not going to share it. We just need it for better analytics on our performance of our roadways, both from a safety perspective. It could be from a throughput perspective. It could be from a near miss, which I think is very important, that we miss out a lot of times because we don't have cameras everywhere. So I think your question is valid. I think if you start early, don't let them come in and then ask later. That's not going to probably be the best negotiation position.
Alan,
but understand what you need to ask for.
Alan and Mireya, if we could have quick responses, then we'll close out the webinar.
Yeah, we don't get any data from the operators currently. We've had conversations around it, but I think there's a lot of value in the data they're collecting and analyzing, producing. And I expect that they'll be glad to sell it to us all someday at a reasonable price.
Mireya?
In terms of the data sharing with OEMs, I haven't heard of too many states who are doing it, but to be fair, we have more states keeping an eye on what's going on than we have participating in autonomous vehicle AVs, CAVs. So I think once we get further along and more people or more states are more comfortable and there's more funding available, I think we'll see more of a shift in that. But at the moment, I know that the states that are doing it are asking, but I haven't heard of any that have been successful with it.
Erica Kemp writes in the chat that she's referring to the project that Mireya mentioned in her presentation in CHRP 2024-147 that gives details on the state of CAV peer exchange results, where 42 states participated, and Anna has shared a link to the report. So Warren, you should definitely check out that report and as well. So, well, I just wanted we're slightly over time now on this wonderful webinar. And so the next webinar will be held after the 2026 January TRB meeting. And so more information will be provided on the webinar as we get closer to that meeting. We're also hoping that you'll be joining us for the upcoming AASHTO, CPBM, and TPM Technical Service Program Joint Quarterly Meeting on December 4th. The featured presentations are an update on the active NCHRP project 08168, analysis and assessment of national performance management data. The presentation will be from Anna Batista of High Street Consulting. We'll also be providing an update on the AASHTO CPBM research roadmap that is being developed by SpyPond. So Francis Harrison and I will give that update and what to expect at the upcoming 2026 TRB annual meeting from Shoshona Thompson of TRB. And so additional webinars are going to be continuing every 2 months. Please send ideas to the webinars you'd like to see. And just a final reminder, for more information, you can visit tpm-portal.com. And thank you to all of our panelists today. This was a fantastic webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jana, and thank you, everyone. Great job.